Euthanasia was an integral part of the Nazi program. The death camps dealt with the old and weak, as well as the political and racial enemies of the Nazis. This is the room of the eternal flame in Yad Vashem, the Israeli memorial in Jerusalem to those who perished in Hitler's Holocaust. Here the victims are commemorated who died in one or another of the concentration and extermination camps that once streaked the skies of Europe with smoke from the burning remains of millions of human beings. The idea of the extermination of the old and weak did not die with Hitler. People have got to be careful about being misled by the euthanasia forces. They are abroad today as they have never been before. In our generation, we are being misled to accept these actions under the Death with Dignity banner. We have all heard people say, "I want to die," who then completely change their ideas about living just a short time later. A part of being a member of the human family is to help our human brothers and sisters over the hard places, not to eliminate them when they're in difficulty. We hear so many arguments for euthanasia put forth under the terms of rights and compassion. These terms were stolen from a more compassionate age and then used for manipulation. Under these terms, the most barbarous ideas are given an air of emotional respectability. When these ideas gain acceptance, the results are ugly. The situation becomes more and more brutal and careless of life, people, individuality, and humanness. Another example of the subtle argument for euthanasia is the way Joseph Fletcher, the popularizer of situation ethics, stresses its connection with abortion. In his discussion on death with dignity in the American Journal of Nursing, he said,
"It is ridiculous to give ethical approval to the positive ending of subhuman life in utero, as we do in therapeutic abortions, for reasons of mercy and compassion, but refuse to approve of positively ending a subhuman life in extremis. If we are morally obliged to put an end to a pregnancy when an amniocentesis reveals a terribly defective fetus, we are equally obliged to put an end to a patient's hopeless misery when a brain scan reveals that a patient with cancer has advanced brain metastases."
Fletcher begins by saying that any other position except his own is ridiculous. He then goes on without discussion and accepts the ethical acceptability of abortion, and then projects this into the moral imperative of aborting the unborn child if, in his case, it is defective. This then is projected further into the taking of the life of the cancer victim who has a severe brain problem. Here is a perfect example of the humanist as the great meddler in human affairs, a meddler in God's affairs.
The destruction process required the cooperation of every sector of German society. The bureaucrats drew up the definitions and decrees, the churches gave evidence of Aryan descent, the postal authorities carried the messages of definition, expropriation, denaturalization, and deportation. A place of execution was made available to the Gestapo and the SS by the Wehrmacht. To repeat, the operation required and received the participation of every major social and political and religious institution of the German Reich. Richard L. Rubenstein, in The Cunning of History.
The important thing for us to remember is that the medical profession took a leading role in the planning of the Nazi euthanasia program. It seems likely that had it not been for the active participation of German physicians, the progress of Hitler's extermination program would at least have been slowed down. Leo Alexander wrote a remarkable paper in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1948 entitled Medical Science Under Dictatorship. That paper is just as apropos today as it was then. We should listen to Leo Alexander because he was the psychiatrist at the Nuremberg trials and had the opportunity to speak hours with each of the Nazi war criminals discussing their role in their native tongue.
Medical science in Nazi Germany collaborated with this trend, particularly in the following enterprises: the mass extermination of the chronically sick in the interest of saving useless expense to the community as a whole, the mass extermination of those considered socially disturbing or racially and ideologically unwanted, the individual, inconspicuous extermination of those considered disloyal within the ruling group, and the ruthless use of human experimental material for medical military research. It started with the acceptance of the attitude basic in the euthanasia movement that there is such a thing as life not worthy to be lived.
Many had reached this point, including many in the medical profession, before Hitler came on the scene. Leo Alexander says that Hitler exterminated 275,000 people in these killing centers. Alexander adds that these 275,000 killed were merely the entering wedge for extermination. The methods used and the personnel trained in these killing centers for the chronically sick became the nucleus for much larger centers in the East, where the plan was to kill all Jews and Poles and to exterminate 30 million Russians. It should be noted that it was not Jews who were killed at first, but the frail, the infirm, and the retarded. Eventually, as World War II approached, amputees from World War I were eliminated because they were of no service to the Reich. I would repeat, physicians took part in this planning, including decisions about life and death, in order to save society money.
The first direct order for euthanasia was issued by Hitler on September 1st, 1939. All state institutions were required to report on patients who had been ill for 5 years or more and who were unable to work by filling out questionnaires giving name, race, marital status, nationality, next of kin, whether regularly visited and by whom, who bore financial responsibility, and so forth. The decision regarding which patient should be killed was made entirely on the basis of this brief information by expert consultants, most of whom were professors of psychiatry in the key universities. These consultants never saw patients themselves.
Alexander tells us that there was a special company for the killing of children known by the euphemistic title of Realms Committee for Scientific Approach to Severe Illness Due to Heredity and Constitution. Transportation of the patients to the killing centers was carried out by the Charitable Transport Company for the Sick. The Charitable Foundation for Institutional Care, Alexander notes, was in charge of collecting the cost of the killings from the relatives, without, however, informing them what the charges were for. In the death certificate, the cause of death was falsified. It all started with the acceptance of the attitude that there was such a thing as a life not worthy to be lived.